The Caribbean night draped its velvet cloak over the endless sea, stars shimmering like scattered coins across the heavens. The Wraith's whisper. A weathered brigantine with sails patched like a beggar's cloak carved a silent path through the inky waters. Her hull creaked softly, a low lullaby of wood and rope, harmonizing with the gentle slap of waves against her sides. The air carried the briny tang of salt, mingling with the faint scent of tar and damp canvas, a perfume known only to those who called the sea their home. At the helm stood Captain Nathaniel Raven, his silhouette sharp against the moon's pale glow, his hands steady on the worn wheel. His eyes, gray as storm clouds, scanned the horizon, searching for something no map could show. Nathaniel was a man carved from the sea's own heart, his face etched with lines of salt and sorrow. Once a name feared from Nassau to Port Royal, he was now a shadow, that legend, haunted by a betrayal that had cost him his brother Elias. 10 years passed. The memory clung to him like damp rot. Elias's face, twisted in anguish, as Nathaniel's choice to save his own skin had left his brother to the mercy of a rival crew. The guilt was a weight heavier than any anchor, and it anchored him to this endless voyage. Seeking redemption in the whispers of the sea, the crew moved about the deck with the quiet rhythm of men long accustomed to the night watch. Lanterns swayed gently, casting pools of amber light that danced with the ship's sway. The men spoke in low murmurs, their voices mingling with the wind's soft sigh and the occasional groan of the mainmast. They were a motley lot, sea dogs and outcasts, bound by the pirate's code and a shared hunger for freedom. Yet tonight their whispers carried an edge of unease. They spoke of curses, of islands that vanished with the dawn, of treasures that demanded a price no man could pay. Nathaniel heard their murmurs, but said nothing. His focus was on the worn leather pouch at his belt, where an ancient map lay folded, its edges frayed like the promises he'd broken. The map had come to him in a tavern in Tortuga, slipped into his hand by a dying man with eyes like polished obsidian. Find the pearl of the deep, the man had rasped, his breath sour with rum and fever. It grants one wish, but beware its song. Nathaniel had dismissed it as a drunkard's tale. But that night, the dreams began. In them the sea sang to him a low, mournful melody that wove through his sleep, calling him to an island cloaked in mist, where shadows moved with purpose. Each night the song grew clearer, the island more vivid, until he could no longer deny its pull. The map, when he unfolded it under moonlight, showed no island, only a spiral of ink that seemed to shimmer and shift. Yet Nathaniel knew it was real as the guilt that gnawed his bones. Captain, came a voice, rough as gravel. Silas, the first mate, stepped into the lantern's glow, his broad frame casting a shadow like a storm cloud. His beard was streaked with gray. His eyes held a glint of ambition that Nathaniel had long learned to mistrust. The men are restless. Talk of that map's got 'em spooked. They say it's cursed, that it leads to naught but death. Nathaniel's gaze remained on the horizon, where the sea met the sky in a line as thin as a blade. Let them talk. Silas, men need stories to keep the dark at bay. Silas snorted, leaning against the rail. Stories ain't what keeps a crew loyal. They want gold, not ghosts. You sure this pearl of yours is worth the trouble? It's worth more than gold, Nathaniel said softly, his fingers brushing the pouch. It's a chance to set things right. Silas's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing more, retreating into the shadows of the deck. Nathaniel knew the man's thoughts. Silas had always hungered for the captain's chair, and a crew's doubt was fertile ground for mutiny. But Nathaniel had sailed through worse storms than a first mate's steaming. He tightened his grip on the wheel, feeling the Wraith's whisper respond, her bow cutting cleanly through the waves. The night deepened, the stars burning brighter, their reflections rippling on the water like a mirror to the heavens. The sea was calm, a rare gift in these waters, and Nathaniel let his mind drift with the tide. He thought of Elias, of the brother who had once stood beside him on this very deck, laughing as they chased merchant ships under a blood-red sunset. Elias had been the heart of their crew, his voice a beacon in the fog, his courage a fire that warmed them all. But Nathaniel's choice, a moment of cowardice to save his own life, had snuffed that fire out. The memory was a wound that never healed, and the pearl of the deep was his only hope of mending it. A soft hum broke his reverie, faint at first, like the wind playing through the rigging. Nathaniel tilted his head, listening. The sound grew a low, mournful note that seemed to rise from the water itself. It was no human voice, nor the cry of any beast he knew. It was the sea, singing its ancient song, the same melody that haunted his dreams. The crew fell silent, their tasks forgotten, as the sound wove through the air, wrapping around the ship like a lover's embrace. Nathaniel's heart quickened, his fingers tightening on the wheel. The map in its pouch seemed to pulse, warm against his side. "Captain," called Jonah, the young lookout perched in the crow's nest. His voice trembled, barely carrying over the song. Like to starboard, green as jade, moving fast, Nathaniel turned, his eyes scanning the dark. There on the horizon a faint, emerald glow flickered, darting like a will-o'-the-wisp before vanishing into the night. The crew stirred, their murmurs rising like the tide. "It's a sign," one muttered. "The sea's playing tricks," said another. Nathaniel said nothing, but his pulse raced. The glow was no trick of the light, it was a beacon, a marker of the path he sought. He reached for the map, unfolding it under the lantern's glow. The ink swirled, the spiral tightening into a shape that might have been an island, its edges blurred as if drawn by a trembling hand. Nathaniel traced the lines, his fingers steady despite the tremor in his chest. The song grew louder, its notes weaving through the creak of the ship and the whisper of the wind. It was calling him, as it had in his dreams, to a place where the sea kept its secrets. "Steady as she goes," Nathaniel called, his voice calm but firm. "We follow the song." The crew exchanged glances, their faces a mix of fear and resolve. They trusted their captain, if only because he had led them through storms and skirmishes with naught but his wits and a steady hand. But the sea was a fickle mistress, and her songs were not always kind. As the Wraith's whisper sailed on, the stars above seemed to pulse in time with the melody, and the water below shimmered with secrets yet to be unveiled. Nathaniel stood alone at the helm, the map clutched in one hand, the wheel in the other. The sea stretched before him, vast and unknowable, its depth hiding truths he both craved and feared. The pearl of the deep was out there, somewhere in the mist, and with it the chance to silence the ghosts that haunted him. The Wraith's whisper sailed on, her sails catching the night's breath, carrying her captain toward a destiny written in starlight and shadow. The Wraith's whisper glided into the harbor of Tortuga as dawn painted the sky in hues of coral and gold, the sea reflecting the colors like a polished mirror. The port was a riot of life, a cacophony of shouts, laughter, and the clink of bottles. Where the air was thick with the scent of rum, smoke, and sweat, ramshackle taverns lined the waterfront, their wooden signs swaying in the breeze, proclaiming names like the Drunken Kraken and the Siren's Call. Ships of every make crowded the dock's sleek sloops, hulking galleons and battered brigs, their masts a forest against the morning sky. Tortuga was a haven for those who lived beyond the law, a place where pirates, smugglers, and outcasts wove their fates beneath the Caribbean sun. Captain Nathaniel Raven stood at the bow, his storm-gray eyes scanning the bustling port. The Wraith's whisper dropped anchor with a groan, her crew bustling to secure the sails and ready the gangplank. Nathaniel's hand rested on the leather pouch at his belt, the ancient map within seeming to hum with a life of its own. The strange song from the night before lingered in his mind, its mournful notes echoing like a half-remembered dream. He had sailed to Tortuga not for rum or revelry, but for answers. Someone here might know of the pearl of the deep, or the island that haunted his sleep. "Silas," Nathaniel called, his voice cutting through the crew's chatter. The first mate appeared, his broad shoulders square, his eyes glinting with a mix of loyalty and cunning. "Take the men ashore," Let them drink their fill, but keep them out of trouble. I've business to attend. Silas nodded, though his gaze lingered on the pouch at Nathaniel's hip. Aye, Captain. But the men are talking. That green light. Last night some say it's a bad omen. Others reckon it's the sea herself, marking us for doom. Let them talk, Nathaniel said, his tone steady as the ship's keel. The sea's always got tales to tell. It's our job to listen, not cower. Silas grunted, turning to bark orders at the crew. Nathaniel watched him go, noting the way the men followed Silas with a mix of respect and wariness. The first mate was a skilled sailor, but his ambition was a tide that could turn against any captain. Nathaniel pushed the thought aside and stepped onto the gangplank, the wood creaking beneath his boots as he descended into the chaos of Tortuga. The port was alive with motion, sailors hauling crates of spices and rum, merchants haggling over stolen goods, and women in tattered finery weaving through the crowd, their laughter sharp as a cutlass. Nathaniel moved with purpose, his dark coat blending with the shadows of the narrow alleys. He knew Tortuga's secrets better than most. It was here years ago that he and the Lions had sworn their oath to sail as brothers, to carve their names into the sea's memory. Now those memories were ghosts, trailing him like the scent of gunpowder. His destination was a tavern tucked at the edge of the port, a squat building with a sign depicting a mermaid cradling a skull. The Widow's Veil was no place for the faint of heart. Its patrons were the kind who dealt in secrets as readily as coin. Inside, the air was thick with pipe smoke and the sour tang of spilled ale. The low hum of voices paused as Nathaniel entered, eyes flicking to his weathered face, then away. He was known here not as the legend he once was, but as a man chasing redemption, a dangerous pursuit in a place like this. At a corner table sat an old woman, her face lined like a chart of uncharted waters. Her hair, white as sea foam, was bound in a scarf embroidered with spiraling symbols that made Nathaniel's pulse quicken. She was known as Mama Celeste, a seer whose predictions were as feared as they were sought. Her eyes, sharp as a hawk's, met his as he approached, and a slow smile curved her lips. "Captain Raven," she said, her voice a low rasp, like waves on a rocky shore. "The sea's been singing to you, hasn't it?" Nathaniel sat, his movements deliberate, and placed a silver coin on the table. "You know why I'm here, Celeste, the pearl of the deep. Tell me what you know." She leaned forward, her fingers tracing the coin's edge. "The pearl ain't just a trinket, boy. It's the sea's heart, older than the rocks of these islands. It grants one wish, true, but it don't come free. The sea always takes her due." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "I've paid enough to the sea. Where's the island?" "The map's no help, it shifts like the tides." Celeste's smile faded, her eyes glinting with something like pity. "The island don't stay put. It comes to those who hear the song, but only when the stars align. You've heard it, haven't you? The song that calls you from the deep." He nodded, the memory of the mournful melody stirring in his chest. "Last night, it wasn't just in my head. The crew heard it too." "Then you're marked," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "The pearl's song chooses its seeker, but it's a dangerous dance. The sea don't give up her secrets without a price." She reached into her shawl and produced a small amulet, a polished stone carved with a spiral that matched the map's design. "Take this, it'll guide you when the map fails." "But he'd me." Nathaniel trusted the song, not the men at your back. He took the amulet, its weight cool and heavy in his palm. The spiral seemed to pulse faintly, like a heartbeat. "And the island, how do I find it?" "Follow the green lights," he said. "They're the sea's eyes watching you. But beware others. Seek the pearl, and not all are flesh and blood." Nathaniel's mind flashed to the emerald glow on the horizon, the way it had danced and vanished. He tucked the amulet into his coat, his fingers brushing the map's pouch. "Anything else I should know?" Celeste leaned back, her eyes distant, as if seeing beyond the tavern's walls. "The sea keeps her own counsel, but she whispers to those who listen. Your brother's shadow lingers, Nathaniel. The pearl might grant your wish, but it won't erase the past. The mention of Elias hit like a cannon shot, but Nathaniel kept his face impassive. "Thank you, Celeste," he said, rising. He left another coin on the table and turned to go, the amulet a quiet weight against his chest. Outside, the sun had climbed higher, bathing Tortuga in a golden haze. The docks buzzed with life. But Nathaniel felt the weight of eyes upon him, not just the curious stares of sailors, but something deeper, older, as if the sea itself were watching. He returned to the Wraith's Whisper, where the crew was loading supplies, barrels of fresh water, sacks of bread, and crates of salted fish. Silas stood by the gangplank, his arms crossed, his gaze sharp. "Find what you were looking for, Captain?" Silas asked, his tone laced with something Nathaniel couldn't quite place. "Enough to keep us sailing," Nathaniel replied, climbing aboard. He didn't mention the amulet or Celeste's warnings, but Silas's eyes lingered on the bulge in his coat. As night fell, the Wraith's Whisper prepared to depart. The crew worked in silence, the memory of the previous night's song heavy in the air. Nathaniel stood at the helm, the amulet now hanging from a cord around his neck, its spiral catching the lantern's light. The map lay open before him, its lines shifting under the moonlight, pointing to a place that existed only in whispers. "Raise the anchor," he called, his voice steady despite the unease creeping through his bones. The crew obeyed, the clank of the chain mingling with the creak of the ship's timbers. As the Wraith's Whisper slipped out of Tortuga's harbor, the sea stretched before her, dark and endless, its surface rippling with secrets, then faint. At first, the song returned. It rose from the water, a low, haunting melody that seemed to weave through the stars themselves. The crew froze, their eyes wide, some crossing themselves, others gripping their knives. Nathaniel's hand closed around the amulet, its stone warm against his palm. On the horizon, a flicker of green light danced, then vanished like a promise or a warning. "Steady on," Nathaniel murmured, more to himself than the crew. The Wraith's Whisper sailed into the night, her boat cutting through the waves, chasing a song that might lead to salvation or to the sea's unyielding embrace. The Wraith's Whisper sailed under sky heavy with stars, their light scattered across the Caribbean like a map of forgotten dreams. The sea was a mirror of the heavens, its surface rippling with reflections that shimmered and swayed with the ship's gentle roll. The air was cool, laced with the salt of the deep, and the faint creak of the brigantine's timbers, a lullaby that had soothed sailors for centuries. Captain Nathaniel Raven stood at the helm, his hands steady on the wheel, the amulet from Mama Celeste a quiet weight against his chest. The ancient map lay open on the chart table beside him, its ink gleaming under the lantern's glow, the spiral at its center seeming to pulse with a life of its own. The song from the sea had faded as Tortuga's lights sank below the horizon, but its echo lingered in Nathaniel's mind, a mournful melody that wove through his thoughts like a tide. The crew moved about the deck with practiced ease, their voices low, their eyes darting to the dark water, as if expecting the green lights to return. The memory of that fleeting emerald glow had set them on edge, their whispers filled with tales of ghost ships and sea spirits. Nathaniel let them talk. Fear was a sailor's companion, as familiar as the stars they navigated by. But he could not shake the weight of Celeste's words. "The sea always takes her due." He glanced at the map, its lines shifting under the moonlight, where once there had been only a vague spiral. Now faint contours suggested an island, its edges blurred as if drawn by a trembling hand. Nathaniel traced the lines with a calloused finger, his brow furrowed. The map was no ordinary chart. It moved like the sea itself, revealing its secrets only when it chose. He had sailed by star and compass for years, navigating the treacherous waters of the Caribbean with a skill that had made him a legend. But this map demanded more than skill, it demanded faith, a currency Nathaniel had spent long ago. "Captain," came a voice, rough and low. Silas, the first mate, approached, his shadow stretching long across the deck. His beard caught the lantern's light, and his eyes held a glint of suspicion. The men are asking questions. That map, some say it's bewitched. Jonah swears he saw it change when he passed by. Nathaniel's gaze remained on the map, his expression unreadable. Jonah's young. He sees what his fears show him. Silas leaned closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "And what do you see, Captain? You've been staring at that thing since Tortuga. If it's leading us to a cursed island, the crew deserves to know." Nathaniel met Silas's eyes. His own is cold as the sea's depths. The crew deserves a captain who keeps his course. The map leads to the pearl of the deep. That's all they need know. Silas's jaw tightened, but he nodded and stepped back, his boots heavy on the deck. Nathaniel watched him go, noting the way Silas lingered near the crew, his words too soft to hear but sharp enough to stir doubt. The first mate was a storm waiting to break, and Nathaniel knew he'd need to watch his back as closely as the horizon. The night deepened, the stars burning brighter, their light a guide for those who knew how to read them. Nathaniel adjusted the ship's course, steering by the constellation of the Southern Cross, its arms pointing toward the uncharted waters where the map's island might lie. The Wraith's whisper responded like a living thing, her sails catching the wind, her hull slicing through the waves with a rhythm as steady as a heartbeat. The amulet at Nathaniel's neck grew warm, its spiral catching the moonlight in a way that made his pulse quicken. "Land ho!" Jonah's voice rang out from the crow's nest, sharp with excitement. The crew stirred, rushing to the rails, their eyes straining into the dark. Nathaniel followed their gaze, his heart thudding. There on the horizon, a faint shadow loomed, a jagged outline that could be an island, its edges softened by a haze of mist. But as quickly as it appeared, it vanished, swallowed by the night as if it had never been. "Trickle the light," muttered one of the men, a grizzled sailor named Caleb, "or the sea's playing games." "It was there," Jonah insisted, climbing down from the nest, his young face flushed. "I saw it clear as day." Nathaniel said nothing, his eyes fixed on the spot where the shadow had been. The map's lines shifted again, the spiral tightening, and he felt the amulet pulse against his skin. The sea was silent now, no song to guide them, but the air felt heavy, as if holding its breath. He turned to the crew, his voice calm but firm. "Keep your eyes sharp. If it's an island, it'll show itself again." The men nodded, though their faces betrayed their unease. They returned to their tasks, but the deck was quieter now, the usual banter replaced by a tense silence. Nathaniel unfolded the map fully, spreading it across the chart table. The ink seemed to writhe under his gaze, the island's shape growing clear, a crescent of land ringed by reef, with a single peak at its center. But as he watched, the lines blurred once more, leaving only the spiral mocking his certainty. Hours passed, the night stretching on, the stars wheeling overhead. Nathaniel remained at the helm, his hands steady, his mind racing. The map's shifting nature was no mere trick. It was tied to the sea, to the song, to the amulet that now felt like a second heartbeat. He thought of Celeste's warning, "Trust the song, not the man at your back," and his gaze flicked to Silas, who stood near the mainmast, speaking in low tones to a cluster of sailors. The first mate's ambition was a shadow Nathaniel could no longer ignore. As midnight approached, the air grew cooler, a faint mist rising from the water like a veil. The crew's murmurs fell silent, their eyes drawn to the sea. Then, without warning, the song returned. It was softer this time, a whisper that seemed to rise from the depths, weaving through the creak of the ship and the sigh of the wind. Nathaniel's grip tightened on the wheel, the amulet burning against his chest. The crew froze, their faces pale, some clutching charms or muttering prayers. "Captain," Jonah called, his voice trembling. The light its back. Nathaniel turned, his eyes locking on the horizon. There, flickering like a distant star, was the emerald glow, brighter now, darting across the water before vanishing into the mist. The map's spiral pulsed in time with the light, and Nathaniel felt a pull in his chest, as if the sea itself were calling him forward. "Adjust the sails," he ordered, his voice cutting through the crew's fear. We follow the light. The men hesitated, their eyes darting between Nathaniel and the horizon. Silas stepped forward, his voice loud enough to carry. Follow a ghost light, Captain. You're leading us to ruin. The men deserve a say in this, Nathaniel faced him, his expression as hard as the ship's oak. The men swore an oath to this ship and its captain. If you've no stomach for the journey, Silas, you're welcome to swim. A tense silence fell, broken only by the sea's whisper. Silas held Nathaniel's gaze, then stepped back, his face a mask of resentment. The crew moved to obey, hauling on ropes and trimming sails, the Wraith's whisper turning toward the vanished light. The mist thickened, curling around the ship like a living thing, its tendrils brushing the deck with a chill that sank into the bones. Nathaniel stood alone. At the helm, the map opened before him, the amulet glowing faintly. The song grew louder, its notes weaving through the mist, a melody both beautiful and sorrowful. The sea stretched before him, vast and unknowable, its secrets hidden in the fog. The Wraith's whisper sailed on, her bow cutting through the waves, chasing a light that might lead to salvation or to a truth Nathaniel was not ready to face. The Wraith's whisper drifted through a sea shrouded in mist, the air heavy with a chill that clung to the skin like damp cloth. The Caribbean night had swallowed the stars, leaving only a faint silver glow from a moon veiled by clouds. The ship's timbers groaned softly, their creaks mingling with the rhythmic slap of waves against the hull, a quiet song that spoke of journeys long and perilous. Lanterns swayed from the rigging, casting pools of amber light that flickered and danced, unable to pierce the fog that enveloped the brigantine like a lover's embrace. Captain Nathaniel Raven stood at the helm, his hands steady on the wheel, the amulet from Mama Celeste warm against his chest, its spiral pulsing faintly in time with his heartbeat. The emerald light that had guided them from Tortuga had vanished hours ago, swallowed by the mist that now cloaked the sea. The crew moved with hushed steps, their faces pale, their eyes darting to the water as if expecting it to rise and claim them. The song of the sea had faded, but its echo lingered in their bones, a haunting melody that stirred memories of old sailors' tales of ships lost to the deep, of voices that called men to their doom. Nathaniel felt it too, a pull that was both promise and warning, but he kept his gaze fixed on the horizon, where the fog swirled like a living thing. The map lay open on the chart table, its ink shimmering under the lantern's glow. The spiral at its center had tightened, its lines now hinting at a crescent-shaped island ringed by jagged reefs, but the details blurred when Nathaniel looked too long. As if the map mocked his need for certainty, he traced the spiral with a finger, his thoughts drifting to Mama Celeste's words. Follow the green lights. They're the sea's eyes, watching you. The amulet at his neck seemed to hum, its warmth a quiet reassurance against the fog's chill. Captain, came a low voice, rough with an ease. Silas, the first mate, emerged from the mist, his broad frame looming like a shadow, his eyes glinted with a mix of defiance and fear, his beard flecked with moisture from the fog. The men are spooked. This fog ain't natural, Caleb swears. He saw a shape in the water, something with eyes. Nathaniel's gaze remained on the map, his voice steady. Caleb sees eyes in every shadow. The fog's thick, but it's just weather. We hold course. Silas stepped closer, his voice dropping to a growl. Weather don't sing, Captain. The men heard it again, soft like from the deep. They're saying this chase for your pearl is cursed. Maybe they're right. Nathaniel turned, his storm gray eyes locking with Silas's. The pearl's no curse, Silas. It's a chance to set things right. If the men lack the stomach for it, they can leave at the next port. Silas's jaw tightened, but he held Nathaniel's gaze a moment longer before turning away, his boots heavy on the deck. Nathaniel watched him disappear into the fog, his mind sharp with suspicion. Silas's words were a spark that could ignite the crew's fears into mutiny, and Nathaniel knew he'd need to tread carefully. The first mate's ambition was a tie that could pull the Wraith's whisper under. The fog thickened, curling around the ship like ghostly fingers, muffling the sounds of the sea. The crew's murmurs grew quieter, their movements slower, as if the mist itself weighed on their spirits. Nathaniel adjusted the wheel, steering by instinct, and the faint pull of the amulet. The map's island seemed closer now, its shape more defined, but the reefs that surrounded it were a warning sharp as teeth, ready to tear a ship to splinters. He thought of Elias, his brother's laugh echoing in his memory. A sound as lost as the stars above. The pearl of the deep was his only hope of silencing that echo, of mending a past that refused to stay buried. A sudden cry broke the silence, sharp and panicked. "Captain, to starboard!" It was Jonah, the young lookout, his voice trembling from the crow's nest. Nathaniel turned, his eyes straining through the fog. There, faint but unmistakable, was a shadow, a ship's silhouette, its mast skeletal. Against the mist, it moved without sound, its sails tattered rags that hung limp, yet it glided as if carried by a current no living ship could feel. The crew gathered at the rail, their faces pale, some clutching charms, others whispering prayers. "It's a ghost ship," Caleb muttered, his voice barely audible. "The drowned maiden. Or I'm no sailor, lost a century ago, they say, crew. And all." "Hold your tongue," Nathaniel snapped, though his own heart thudded. The shadow ship drifted closer, its hull black as pitch, its deck empty. No lanterns burned, no voices called, yet Nathaniel felt eyes upon him, cold and unyielding. The amulet at his neck grew hot, its spiral glowing faintly, and the map on the table pulsed in time, its ink swirling wildly. "Captain, we should turn back," Silas said, his voice loud enough for the crew to hear. "This ain't no natural fog, and that ain't no natural ship. We're sailing into death." Nathaniel's grip tightened on the wheel, his voice cutting through the mist. "We turn back, we lose the pearl, we lose our chance. You want to run, Silas, you swim for it." A tense silence fell, broken only by the creak of the ship and the soft lapping of waves. The shadow ship lingered a moment longer, then faded into the fog as if it had never been. The crew exhaled, their fear palpable, but Nathaniel kept his eyes on the horizon. The amulet's glow dimmed, but its warmth remained, a reminder of the path he'd chosen. "Keep to your posts," he ordered, his voice steady despite the chill in his bones. "The sea's testing us. We hold fast." The crew obeyed, though their movements were sluggish, their eyes darting to the fog. Nathaniel returned to the map, its lines now showing a clear path through the reefs, as if the shadow ship had unlocked some secret. He adjusted the ship's course, the Wraith's whisper gliding through the mist with a grace that belied the tension on her deck. The fog seemed to part before them, revealing glimpses of open water. But the air grew heavier, the silence deeper, as if the sea itself were holding its breath. Hours passed, the night stretching on, the fog a constant companion. Nathaniel stood alone at the helm, the amulet a quiet pulse against his chest. He thought of Elias, of the brother who had trusted him, who had died because of his cowardice. The pearl of the deep was more than a treasure, it was a chance to face that truth, to make amends in a way no man could. But the shadow ship lingered in his mind, its empty deck a warning he couldn't ignore. As dawn approached, the fog began to thin, revealing a sea that sparkled under the first light. The map's lines grew still, the island's shape now clearer, crescent of land with a single peak surrounded by reefs that gleamed like bones. Nathaniel felt a surge of hope, tempered by the weight of Celeste's words. "Not all who seek the pearl are flesh and blood." The shadow ship had been no illusion, and its presence was a riddle he had yet to solve. "Captain," Jonah's voice rang out sharp with excitement. Land ahead, clear as day. Nathaniel looked up, his heart leaping. There, on the horizon, was a faint outline, an island, its peak rising like a sentinel against the dawn. The crew stirred, their fear giving way to cautious hope, but Nathaniel's eyes narrowed. The island was real, but the fog still clung to its edges, and the amulet burned against his skin. "Steady on," he called, his voice calm but firm. The Wraith's whisper sailed toward the island, her sails catching the morning breeze, her bow cutting through the waves. The sea was silent now, no song to guide them. But Nathaniel felt its eyes upon him, watching, waiting. The pearl of the deep was close, but so was the shadow that followed, and Nathaniel knew the sea would not yield its secrets without a price. The Wraith's whisper anchored just beyond the jagged reefs that guarded the crescent-shaped island, its silhouette rising from the sea like a forgotten prayer. The dawn had burned away the last of the fog, revealing a land cloaked in mystery. A single peak jutting from a tangle of dark greenery, its slopes shrouded in mist that clung like a widow's veil. The air was heavy with the scent of salt and damp earth mingled with something older, sharper, like the breath of a long-buried secret. The ship's timbers creaked softly, her sails furled, as if she too sensed the weight of the place. Captain Nathaniel Raven stood at the bow, his storm-gray eyes fixed on the island, the amulet from Mama Celeste warm against his chest, its spiral pulsing faintly in time with the waves. The crew gathered on the deck, their faces a mix of awe and unease. The island was no mirage, it was solid, real, its presence undeniable under the morning sun. Yet the memory of the shadow ship lingered, its ghostly form a warning that this place was no ordinary shore. The map, now spread across the chart table, had settled into a clear outline of the island, its reef and peak drawn in ink that no longer shifted. Nathaniel traced the spiral at its center, his fingers steady despite the tremor in his heart. The pearl of the deep was here, somewhere within that dark expanse, and with it, the chance to silence the ghosts of his past. "Prepare the longboats," Nathaniel called, his voice cutting through the crew's murmurs. "We make for the shore. Caleb, Jonah, Silas, you're with me. The rest, guard the ship." Silas stepped forward, his broad frame casting a shadow across the deck. "You sure about this, Captain? That island don't feel right. The men are saying it's cursed, and after that ghost ship enough." Nathaniel snapped, his eyes hard. "The pearls on that island. We've come too far to turn back now, if you're scared." "Stay with the ship." Silas's jaw tightened, but he nodded, his gaze flickering to the amulet at Nathaniel's neck. The crew moved to obey, lowering the longboats with practiced efficiency, though their hands trembled, and their eyes darted to the island's peak. Nathaniel tucked the map into his coat. The amulet's warmth a quiet reassurance against the growing unease. He climbed into the lead boat, Silas, Caleb, and Jonah following, their oars dipping into the water with a rhythm as steady as a heartbeat. The sea was calm, its surface a mirror reflecting the island's dark silhouette. As the longboats approached the shore, the reefs loomed like the bones of some ancient beast, their edges sharp enough to tear a ship to splinters. Nathaniel steered by instinct, guided by the map's memory and the amulet's faint pulse. The beach was a narrow strip of black sand, fringed by twisted trees that leaned toward the sea as if yearning to escape. The air grew heavier, the silence deeper, broken only by the soft lap of waves and the distant cry of a seabird. They dragged the boats onto the sand, the crunch of their boots loud in the stillness. Nathaniel scanned the shore, his eyes drawn to a path that wound into the jungle, its entrance marked by two stone pillars carved with spirals that matched the amulet's design. The crew exchanged glances, their faces pale, but Nathaniel's resolve was iron. "We follow the path," he said, his voice low but firm. "Stay close." The jungle swallowed them, its canopy blocking the sun, casting the world in a twilight of green and shadow. The air was thick with the scent of moss and decay, the ground soft beneath their boots, vines twisted like serpents, their leaves brushing against the men with a whisper that felt almost alive. Nathaniel led the way, the amulet glowing faintly, its light cutting through the gloom. The map clutched in his hand seemed to hum, its spiral pulsing in time with the stone's glow. "Captain," Jonah whispered, his young voice trembling. "You hear that? Like a song, but wrong." Nathaniel paused, his ears straining. There it was, a faint, dissonant melody, not the mournful song of the sea, but something sharper, colder, like the echo of a scream trapped in the deep. It came from ahead, where the path curved toward the island's peak. The amulet burned against his chest, and Nathaniel felt a pull as if the island itself were calling him forward. "Keep moving," he said, his voice steady despite the chill in his bones. The crew followed, their steps cautious, their hands on their cutlasses. Silas walked at the rear, his eyes darting to the shadows, his silence heavier than the jungle's air. The path led to a clearing where the ruins of an ancient structure rose from the earth, a circle of weathered stones, their surfaces etched with spirals and symbols that seemed to writhe in the dim light. At the center stood an altar, its surface stained with something dark, its edges carved with seams of shit swallowed by waves. Nathaniel's breath caught, the amulet's glow brightening, casting eerie shadows across the stones. The map's spiral matched the altar's design, and he knew they were closer than ever to the pearl of the deep. "This is it," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The pearl's here. Somewhere." Caleb stepped forward, his grizzled face pale. "This place ain't right, Captain. These stones, they're old, older than any ship, and that song, it's coming from the ground." Before Nathaniel could respond, the melody grew louder, its notes twisting into a wail that set the air trembling. The crew froze, their eyes wide. As a shadow moved at the edge of the clearing, a figure, cloaked in mist, its form indistinct, but human, it lingered for a moment, then vanished, leaving only the echo of the song and the scent of salt in the air. "Elias," Nathaniel whispered, his heart thudding. The figure had been too fleeting to be sure, but its shape, its movements, it was his brother's ghost, or a trick of the island's magic. The amulet burned hotter, and the map in his hand seemed to pulse, its ink glowing faintly. "Captain, we should go," Silas said, his voice sharp. "This place'll take us all." Nathaniel turned, his eyes blazing. "We're not leaving, not now. The pearl's here, and I'll find it." Silas's hand rested on his cutlass, his gaze hard. "You're chasing ghosts, Raven. The men won't die for your regrets." The words hung in the air, heavy as the jungle's heat. Nathaniel felt the crew's eyes on him, their fear a tangible weight. He stepped toward the altar, the amulets, light guiding him, and knelt to examine the carvings. The spiral seemed to move, leading his gaze to a stone slab at the altar's base, its surface etched with a single word: sacrifice. The song grew louder, its wail filling the clearing, and Nathaniel felt the island's pulse beneath his feet, as if it were alive. The amulet glowed brighter, its spiral mirroring the altar's design, and he knew the pearl was closed, but so was the price Mama Celeste had warned of. The sea demanded its due, and Nathaniel feared it would be more than he could bear. "Search the ruins," he ordered, his voice firm despite the tremor in his chest. "Look for anything that matches the map." The crew hesitated, then moved to obey, their steps cautious, their eyes darting to the shadows. Nathaniel stood by the altar, the amulets light a beacon in the gloom, the map a weight in his hand. The island watched, its song a promise and a threat, and Nathaniel knew that whatever lay ahead, the path to the pearl would test him in ways he could not yet fathom. The jungle of the shadowed island pressed close, its air thick with the scent of damp earth and ancient decay, a weight that seemed to cling to the skin like salt spray. The Wraith's whisper lay anchored beyond the reefs, a distant silhouette against the Caribbean's twilight, her masts swaying gently in the evening breeze. The ruins in the clearing stood silent, their spiral-carved stones bathed in the fading light, the altar at their center a dark sentinel etched with the word sacrifice. Captain Nathaniel Raven knelt beside it, the amulet from Mama Celeste glowing softly against his chest, its spiral pulsing in time with the faint, dissonant song that rose from the earth. The map in his hand felt warm, its ink steady now, the crescent island's outline clear, its peak a beacon to the pearl of the deep. The crew moved cautiously among the ruins, their boots crunching on the moss-covered stones, their faces pale under the weight of the island's presence. Caleb, the grizzled sailor, traced the spirals on a fallen pillar, his fingers trembling. Jonah, the young lookout, stood frozen, his eyes darting to the shadows where the ghostly figure had vanished. Silas, the first mate, lingered near the clearing's edge, his hand on his cutlass, his gaze sharp with suspicion. The song from the deep had grown louder, its wail weaving through the jungle's stillness, a melody that was both beautiful and wrong, like a siren's call laced with despair. Nathaniel's heart thudded. The amulet's warmth a steady pulse against his skin. The figure he'd seen, its shape so like Elias, his lost brother, had shaken him, stirring memories of betrayal and guilt that cut deeper than any blade. The pearl of the deep was here, he was certain. But the island's secrets were guarded by more than stone and shadow. Mama Celeste's warning echoed in his mind. The sea always takes her due. He rose, his storm-gray eyes scanning the ruins, the map clutched tightly in his hand. "Captain," Jonah whispered, his voice barely audible over the song. "It's coming from below." "The ground, it's alive," Nathaniel nodded, his gaze fixed on the altar. The word sacrifice seemed to glow in the twilight, its letters carved deep, as if by a hand that knew the sea's hunger. He stepped closer, the amulet's light casting eerie shadows across the stone. The song grew louder, its notes vibrating in his chest, and he felt a pull as if the island itself were beckoning him into its heart. "Search the altar," he ordered, his voice steady despite the chill in his bones. "There's a way down." "The pearl's close." Caleb hesitated, his face pale. "This place ain't right, Captain. That song, it's not for us. It's for the dead." "Enough," Nathaniel snapped, though his own heart wavered. "We've faced storms and cannon, fire. We won't turn back now." Silas stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. "And what if Caleb's right? Your chess in a dream, Raven, and dragging us all to hell. The men deserve better than to die for your ghosts." Nathaniel met Silas's gaze, his own as hard as the altar's stone. "The pearl's no dream, Silas. It's real, and it's here. If you've no faith in me, take a boat and row back to the ship." Silas's hand tightened on his cutlass, but he stepped back, his silence heavy with resentment. The crew moved to the altar, their hands probing the stone for hidden mechanisms. Jonah, his young face set with determination, pressed against the slab marked sacrifice. It shifted with a low groan, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness, its steps worn smooth by time or tide. The song surged, its wail filling the clearing, and a cold breeze rose from the depths carrying the scent of salt and something sharper, like blood. Nathaniel led the way, the amulet's glow lighting the stairs, its spiral casting swirling patterns on the damp walls. The crew followed, their footsteps echoing, their breaths shallow in the oppressive air. The staircase spiraled downward, its walls carved with scenes of ships swallowed by waves, of figures offering treasures to a sea that never gave them back. Nathaniel's heart pounded, the amulet burning against his chest, the map in his hand pulsing as if alive. The song was deafening now, its notes a chorus of longing and loss. And he felt Elias's presence, a shadow at his side, as real as the stone beneath his feet. The stairs ended in a cavern, its walls glistening with moisture, its floor a mosaic of shells and coral that shimmered in the amulet's light. At the center stood a pool, its water black as ink, its surface rippling with the song's rhythm. Above it hung a stone carved with the same spiral, its edges glowing faintly, as if kissed by the sea's own light. Nathaniel approached, the amulet's glow brightening, the map's ink swirling in time with the pool's ripples. The pearl of the deep was here, he could feel it, but truth as certain as the tide. "Captain," Caleb whispered, his voice trembling, "look at the water." Nathaniel followed his gaze. In the pool's depths, shapes moved, shadows that were not reflections, their forms twisting like smoke. One took the shape of a man, his face achingly familiar, his eyes filled with sorrow. "Elias?" Nathaniel's breath caught, his hand reaching for the amulet, its heat searing his skin. The song reached a crescendo, its wail shaking the cavern, and the shadows in the pool surged, their forms reaching upward as if to pull the living into their embrace. "Stay back," Nathaniel shouted, his voice cutting through the song. Jonah, his eyes wide with awe, stepped closer, drawn to the pool's edge. "It's beautiful," he murmured, his voice dreamlike. "It's calling me." Before Nathaniel could react, Jonah reached for the water, his fingers brushing its surface. The pool erupted in a burst of light, the shadows lunging, and Jonah screamed, his body jerking as if seized by an unseen hand. Nathaniel lunged forward, grabbing the boy's arm, pulling him back with all his strength. The shadows recoiled, the song faltering, and Jonah collapsed, his breath ragged, his eyes wide with terror. It knew my name," Jonah gasped, his voice barely a whisper. "It wanted me." Nathaniel's heart thundered. The amulet's glow dimming as the pool grew still. The shadows retreated, but Elias's face lingered in his mind. A silent accusation. He turned to the crew there, faces pale, their hands trembling. "We're close," he said, his voice firm despite the fear gnawing at him. "The pearl's here, but we need to be careful. No one touches the water." Silas stepped forward, his eyes blazing. "Careful. That boy nearly died. Raven, this island's a trap. And you're leading us straight into it." Nathaniel faced him, his hand on the hilt of his cutlass. "The pearl's our way out, Silas. It's my burden, not yours. If you want off this island, take the boat and go." Silas held his gaze, then spat on the ground and turned away, his silence a storm, waiting to break. Nathaniel knelt beside Jonah, helping the boy to his feet. "You're all right," he said, his voice softer now. "Stay close to me." The crew searched the cavern, their movements cautious, their eyes avoiding the pool. Nathaniel studied the stone above it, its spiral matching the amulet's design. He pressed his hand against it, and the stone shifted, revealing a hidden niche. Inside lay a small, carved box, its surface etched with the same spirals, its wood warm to the touch. Nathaniel's breath caught. This was it, the key to the pearl. But as he reached for the box, the song surged again, its wails shaking the cavern. The pool rippled, the shadows stirring, and Nathaniel felt the weight of the island's gaze. Its hunger a living thing. The amulet burned, the map pulsed, and he knew the pearl was closed, but so was the price, and the sea was watching, waiting for its due. The cavern beneath the shadowed island pulsed with an ancient rhythm, its walls glistening with the sea's breath, the air thick with the scent of salt and stone. The black pool at its center lay still, its surface a mirror to the darkness, though the shadows within stirred faintly, as if dreaming of the living. The song of the deep had faded to a whisper, a mournful hum that wove through the creak of the Wraith's whisper anchored beyond the reefs, its distant silhouette a reminder of the world above. Captain Nathaniel Raven stood before the carved box in the niche, its spiral etchings glowing faintly under the amulet's light, the map in his hand warm and pulsing. The pearl of the deep was close, its promise a beacon in the gloom. But the weight of the island's secrets pressed against him, heavy as the guilt that anchored his soul. The crew stood in a tense semicircle, their faces pale in the amulet's glow. Jonah, still shaken from his brush with the pool, clung to the cavern wall, his young eyes wide with fear. Caleb, the grizzled sailor, gripped his cutlass, his gaze darting to the shadows. Silas, the first mate, stood apart, his broad frame taut, his eyes burning with a fire that Nathaniel knew too well, ambition, sharp as a blade, ready to cut through loyalty. The word sacrifice carved into the altar loomed in Nathaniel's mind, a warning that the sea's price was yet to be paid. Nathaniel reached for the box, his fingers brushing its warm wood, the spiral seeming to writhe under his touch. The amulet at his neck burned hotter, its glow casting eerie patterns across the cavern, mirroring the map sync. He felt Elias's presence, a shadow at his side. His brother's face, a silent accusation from the past. The box was the key to the pearl, he was certain, but the island's song whispered of a cost he could not yet name. "Captain," Silas's voice cut through the silence, low and sharp. "You opened that, and we're all doomed." That pool nearly took Jonah. This place wants blood. Nathaniel turned, his storm gray eyes locking with Silas's. The pearls are way out, Silas. It's my burden, not yours. Stand down, Silas. Step closer, his hand on his cutlass, his voice rising. Your burden, your chastened ghosts, Raven, and dragging us with you. The men deserve the truth. What's this pearl worth? Your brother's shade, or just your guilt? The words struck like a cannon shot, and Nathaniel's hand tightened on the box. The crew stirred, their eyes flickering between captain and first mate, the tension thick as the cavern's air. Jonah's voice trembled from the shadows. Captain, he's right. This place sits alive. It knows us. Enough, Nathaniel snapped, his voice steady despite the storm in his chest. The pearl's here, and I'll find it. If you've no stomach for it, take the boat and go. Silas's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, the cavern held its breath. Then, with a speed that belied his bulk, Silas drew his cutlass, the blade glinting in the amulet's light. I'm done following? A fool's quest, he growled. The map, the amulet, hand him over, Raven. I'll lead this crew to gold, not curses. The crew froze, their hands hovering over their weapons, their loyalty split like a frayed rope. Nathaniel stood his ground, the box clutched in one hand, the map in the other. His own cutlass still sheathed. You'd betray your captain for a trinket you don't understand, he said, his voice low. Dangers. The pearl's more than gold, Silas. It's redemption. Silas laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the walls. Redemption. You're a coward who let his brother die. The men know it. I know it. And over the map, or I'll take it. Nathaniel's heart thudded, Elias's face flashing in his mind, his brother's laugh, his trust, his final scream. The amulet burned against his chest, and the song of the deep surged, its wail filling the cavern, shaking the walls. The pool rippled, its shadows stirring, and Nathaniel felt the island's gaze. Hungry and unyielding, he stepped back, the box pressed to his chest, his eyes never leaving Silas. Caleb, Jonah, Nathaniel said, his voice calm but firm. Stand with me or stand with him. Choose now. Caleb hesitated, his grizzled face torn, but he stepped to Nathaniel's side, his cutlass drawn. Jonah followed, his hand shaking but his jaw set. Silas's lips curled into a sneer. So be it, he said, and lunged. The cavern erupted in chaos, steel clashing against steel. The song of the deep, a deafening roar. Nathaniel parried Silas's strike, the box slipping from his grasp, skidding across the floor. Jonah dove for it, but Silas's blade caught Caleb's arm, drawing blood. The grizzled sailor grunted, staggering back as Nathaniel pressed forward, his cutlass a blur. The amulet glowed brighter, its light blinding, and the pool surged, its shadows reaching upward like claws. Stop, Nathaniel roared, his voice cutting through the song. He drove Silas back, their blades locked, their faces inches apart. You'll doom us all, Silas's eyes blazed, but before he could strike again, the amulet erupted in a burst of light, its spiral searing the air. The box on the floor cracked open, and a pulse of energy swept through the cavern, throwing Silas to the ground. The song faltered, the shadows retreating, and a single object rolled from the box, a stone, small and smooth, glowing with an inner light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Nathaniel's breath caught. It wasn't the pearl, but it was part of the path, a key to the island's heart. He dove for the stone, his fingers closing around its warmth. The amulet's glow dimming as the song faded to a whisper. Silas scrambled to his feet, his cutlass raised, but Caleb and Jonah stood between him and Nathaniel, their weapons ready. Enough, Silas, Caleb drawled. You've made your choice. Silas's chest heaved, his eyes darting to the stone in Nathaniel's hand. For a moment, he seemed ready to fight, but the cavern's silence, the weight of the island's gaze, held him back. He spat on the ground, his voice bitter. This ain't over, Raven. The seal have its due. Nathaniel tucked the stone into his coat, the amulet cooling against his chest. Get him to the boat, he said to Caleb. He stays on the ship under guard. Caleb nodded, binding Silas's hands with rope, while Jonah retrieved the box, its wood now cold and lifeless. The crew moved in silence, their faces grinned. The betrayal wound as raw as the cut on Caleb's arm. Nathaniel led them back up the stairs, the stone a heavy weight in his pocket, the map pulsing faintly in his hand. The song of the deep was quiet now, but its echo lingered, a reminder of the price yet to be paid. They emerged into the jungle, the twilight sky abruze of purple and gold. The Wraith's whisper waited beyond the reefs, her lanterns glowing like stars against the sea. Nathaniel paused at the clearing's edge, the amulet's spiral catching the last light. The stone in his pocket a promise and a threat. Silas's betrayal had shaken him, but the island's secrets were deeper, darker, and the pearl was still out there, hidden in the shadows of the sea dock. As they rowed back to the ship, the island loomed behind them, its peak a silent sentinel. The song whispered faintly, a melody of longing and loss, and Nathaniel felt Elias's presence, closer now, a shadow that would not fade. The sea watched, its eyes hidden in the waves. And Nathaniel knew the journey was far from over. The Wraith's whisper rocked gently on the swells beyond the shadowed island's reefs, her lanterns casting pools of amber light across the deck, their glow swallowed by the Caribbean night. The sea stretched endless and dark, its surface a mirror of stars that flickered like secrets half revealed. The air was heavy with salt and the faint tang of damp wood, the ship's timbers creaking in a soft rhythm that blended with the whisper of waves. Captain Nathaniel Raven stood at the helm, his storm-gray eyes fixed on the island's silhouette, its peak a jagged scar against the moonlit sky. The amulet from Mama Celeste hung warm against his chest, its spiral pulsing faintly, while the glowing stone from the cavern weighed heavy in his coat, a silent promise of the pearl of the deep. The crew worked in hushed silence, their faces drawn, the sting of Silas's betrayal still raw. The first mate was confined below, bound and guarded, his mutinous words a shadow that lingered over the ship. Caleb, his arm bandaged from the skirmish, stood near the mainmast, his grizzled face set with determination. Jonah, the young lookout, clung to the rigging, his eyes darting to the island, haunted by the pool shadows that had nearly claimed him. The song of the deep had faded, but its echo lingered in the air, a mournful hum that seemed to rise from the sea itself, weaving through the creak of the ship and the sigh of the wind. Nathaniel's fingers traced the map on the chart table, its ink now steady, the crescent islands outlined clear, a path leading from the cavern to the peak. The stone from the box was no mere trinket, it was a key, its glow tied to the amulet and the map, a guide to the pearl's hiding place. But the word sacrifice carved into the altar haunted him, as did the ghostly figure of Elias, his brother's face, a constant reminder of the price he'd paid for cowardice. Mama Celeste's warning echoed in his mind, not all who seek the pearl are flesh and blood. The island was alive, its secrets guarded by forces older than the sea itself. Captain! Caleb's voice broke the silence, rough but steady. The men are restless. Silas's talks got him spooked. And that island, it ain't natural. They're saying we should sail for Port Royal. Leave this cursed place behind. Nathaniel's gaze remained on the map, his voice calm. The pearls on that island, Caleb. It's our chance, my chance to make things right. We go back at dawn. Caleb nodded, though his eyes betrayed his doubt. And Silas, he's stirring trouble. Even bound, the men listened to him. Keep him locked tight, Nathaniel said, his tone hard. If he speaks again, gag him. We've come too far to let mutiny tear us apart. Caleb turned away, his boots heavy on the deck, and Nathaniel felt the weight of the crew's fear, a tide that could pull the Wraith's whisper under. He clutched the stone, its glow seeping through his fingers, and the amulet pulsed in time, as if urging him back to the island. The map's path led to the peak, where the spirals converged, and Nathaniel knew the pearl was there, waiting in the heart of the island's shadows. As midnight fell, the sea grew still, its surface a glassy expanse that reflected the stars like a second sky. Nathaniel stood alone at the helm, the amulet's light casting faint spirals across the deck. He thought of Elias, his brother's laugh a ghost in the wind, his betrayal a wound that refused to heal. The pearl was his redemption, but the islands. Song whispered of a price he could not yet name. The stone in his pocket seemed to hum, its glow a beacon in the dark, and Nathaniel felt a pull, as if the sea itself were calling him back to the shore. At dawn, the crew prepared the longboats. They returned to the island, their faces grim but resolute. Nathaniel led the way, the stone and amulet warm against his skin, the map tucked into his coat. The black sand beach crunched under their boots, the jungle's canopy swallowing them once more. The path to the peak was steeper now, the air thick, with the scent of moss and salt, the song of the deep a faint whisper that grew louder with each step. The crew moved in silence, their eyes darting to the shadows, their hands on their cutlasses. The trail wound upward, the trees thinning as they climbed, revealing glimpses of the sea below, its surface shimmering under the morning sun. The amulet glowed brighter, its spiral matching the carvings on the stones that lined the path, their surfaces etched with scenes of offerings and storms. Nathaniel's heart thudded, the stone in his pocket pulsing in time, and he felt Elias's presence closer now, a shadow that walked beside him, silent but heavy. They reached the peak as the sun climbed higher, its light casting long shadows across a plateau ringed by jagged rocks. At its center stood a stone arch, its surface carved with spirals that glowed faintly, mirroring the amulet's light. Beyond it lay a shallow pool, its water clear but deep, its bottom lined with shells that shimmered like pearls. Nathaniel's breath caught the pearl of the deep was here. He was certain, hidden in the pool's heart. He stepped forward, the stone in his hand glowing brighter, the amulet burning against his chest. The map's spirals converged on the arch, and Nathaniel knew this was the place. He knelt by the pool, its surface rippling faintly, and saw his reflection, not just his own, but Elias's. His brother's face staring back, his eyes filled with sorrow. The song surged, its melody a wail that shook the air, and the pool's water stirred, shadows moving within like ghosts. "Captain," Jonah whispered, his voice trembling. "It's the same as the cavern. It's alive." Nathaniel nodded, his hand closing around the stone. "This is it," he said, his voice steady. "The pearl's here. We just need to find it." Caleb stepped closer, his face pale. "And the price, that word sacrifice. What's it mean, Captain?" Nathaniel's jaw tightened, the amulet's heat searing his skin. "It means we face the truth," he said, his voice low. "Whatever it takes." He placed the stone in a hollow at the ark's base, its glow merging with the spiral's light. The pool erupted in a burst of radiance, the song reaching a crescendo, and a shape rose from the water, pearl, larger than a man's fist, glowing with an inner light that pulsed like a star. Nathaniel's heart leaped, but the shadows in the pool surged, their forms reaching upward, their voices whispering his name, Elias. The word was a knife in his chest. And Nathaniel saw his brother's face in the water, his eyes accusing, his mouth forming words that cut deeper than steel. "You left me." The song wailed, the shadows lunged, and Nathaniel felt the island's hunger, its demand for a price he could not escape. "Captain?" Caleb shouted, pulling him back as the shadows reached for his boots. The pearl hovered above the pool, its light blinding, and Nathaniel knew the truth. The pearl could grant his wish, but only if he faced the past, only if he paid the sea's due. He stood, the amulet glowing, the stone pulsing, the map await. In his coat, the crew watched, their faces pale, their hands trembling. The pearl was within reach, but the shadows of the deep were closer, and Nathaniel felt the weight of Elias's gaze. A truth he could no longer run from. The shadowed island's peak stood bathed in the golden light of late morning, the Caribbean sun casting long fingers of warmth across the stone arch and the shimmering pool at its heart. The Wraith's whisper lay anchored beyond the reef, a distant speck against the endless sea. Her sails furled, her deck silent under the weight of the crew's absence. The air was thick with the scent of salt and blooming vines, the jungle's hum blending with the faint creak of the island's ancient stones. The song of the deep pulsed softly, a mournful melody that wove through the rustle of leaves and the lap of waves against the shore. Below, Captain Nathaniel Raven stood before the pool, his storm-gray eyes fixed on the pearl of the deep, its radiant glow hovering above the water, a star born from the sea's own heart. The amulet from Mama Celeste burned against his chest, its spiral, casting faint patterns across the arch, mirroring the carvings that seemed to pulse with life. The glowing stone from the cavern, now placed in the ark's hollow, hummed in harmony with the amulet, its light merging with the pearls. The map, tucked in Nathaniel's coat, felt warm, its ink steady, the island's outline a silent guide to this moment. The crew stood behind him, Caleb's grizzled face set with resolve, Jonah's young eyes wide with awe and fear, Silas, bound and under guard back on the ship, was a shadow that lingered in their minds, his betrayal a wound still fresh. The pearl hung suspended, its light pulsing like a heartbeat, its surface smooth and luminous, as if carved from the moon itself. Nathaniel's breath caught, his heart thudding with the weight of what had promised redemption, a chance to silence the ghost of Elias, his brother whose face had haunted him in the pool's shadows. But the song of the deep was louder now, its notes a wail of longing and warning, and the shadows in the pool stirred, their forms reaching upward, whispering his name, Elias. The word was a blade, cutting through the years of guilt, and Nathaniel felt the island's gaze, its hunger a living thing that demanded more than he had ever given. Captain, Caleb's voice was rough, his bandaged arm held close. That pearl, it's what you came for. But it's watching us, like it knows us. Nathaniel nodded, his hand resting on the amulet, its heat a steady pulse. It knows me, he said, his voice low, heavy with truth. It knows what I've done. Jonah stepped closer, his voice trembling. The shadows, they spoke to me in the cavern. They knew my name, my fears. What if the pearl wants more than we can give? Nathaniel's jaw tightened, Mama Celeste's words echoing in his mind. The sea always takes her due. He stepped toward the pool, the pearl's light bathing him in a glow that felt both warm and cold, like the touch of a lover long lost. The shadows surged, their forms clearer now. Elias's face, his eyes filled with sorrow, his mouth forming words that Nathaniel had dreaded for a decade. You left me. The song wailed, shaking the air. And the pool rippled, its shadows reaching. For his boots stayed back, Nathaniel warned, his voice sharp. He knelt by the pool, the amulets like casting spirals across the water, the stone in the arch pulsing in time. The pearl seemed to hum, its glow intensifying, and Nathaniel felt a pull, as if the sea itself were drawing him into its depths. He reached out, his fingers inches from the pearl, but the shadows lunged, their forms wrapping around his arm, cold as the deep. He gasped, the amulet burning, and Elias's voice filled his mind, a whisper that cut deeper than steel. Why, Nathaniel? Why did you choose yourself? The words were a storm, tearing through the walls he'd built around his guilt. Nathaniel saw it all again, the rival ship closing in, Elias standing at the helm, his laugh defiant as cannon fire roared. Nathaniel had chosen to flee to save the Wraith's whisper and himself, leaving Elias to face the enemy alone. His brother's scream had haunted him ever since, a sound that no sea could drown. The pearl was his chance to make it right, to wish for Elias's forgiveness. But the shadows demanded truth first. I'm sorry, Nathaniel whispered, his voice breaking. I was a coward. I failed you. The shadows paused, their forms softening, and the song of the deep softened too, its well giving way to a mournful hum. The pearl's glow brightened, its light warm now, inviting, and Nathaniel felt a shift, as if the island had heard his confession. He reached for the pearl again, his fingers brushing its surface, and a surge of warmth flooded through him, the amulet pulsing in time. The shadows retreated, Elias's face fading, but his eyes lingered, no longer accusing, but sad, as if waiting for something more. Captain, Caleb shouted, his voice urgent. The pool, it's changing. Nathaniel pulled his hand back, the pearl still hovering, and saw the water shift, its surface clearing to reveal a visionless ship. Not the Wraith's whisper, but another. Its sails tattered, its hull black as pitch. It was the shadow ship from the fog, its deck empty, its mast skeletal. But now figures moved upon it, ghosts, their faces familiar. Sailors Nathaniel had known, lost to storms and battles. At the helm stood Elias, his eyes fixed on Nathaniel, his hand pointing to the horizon. The song surged, its melody a call to follow, and the amulet burned, its spiral glowing brighter. Nathaniel understood the pearl was not the end, but a step. The island was a gate, and the shadow ship was its keeper, guiding him to the true heart of the deep. He stood, the pearl's light fading slightly, as if waiting for his choice. "We're not done," Nathaniel said, his voice steady despite the weight in his chest. "The pearl's tied to that ship. We need to find it." Caleb's face paled. "The ghost ship, Captain, that's madness. We've got the pearl, take it and be done." Nathaniel shook his head, his hand closing around the amulet. "The pearl's not enough. It's a key, not the answer. The sea's leading us, and we follow." Jonah's eyes widened, but he nodded, his fear tempered by trust. Caleb muttered a curse but stepped closer, his cutlass ready. The song of the deep hummed softly, its notes weaving through the air. And Nathaniel felt the island's pulse, its rhythm guiding him back to the shore. He took the pearl, its glow warm in his hand, and tucked it into his coat beside the map and the stone. The amulet pulsed, its light a beacon, and Nathaniel knew the journey was far from over. They descended the peak, the jungle shadows closing around them. The song a faint whisper that followed their steps. The Wraith's whisper waited beyond the reefs, her lanterns glowing like stars against the sea. As they rowed back, the island loomed behind them, its peak a silent sentinel, its secrets still hidden. Nathaniel felt Elias's presence, a shadow that walked beside him, and the pearl's weight in his coat, a promise and a burden. The crew climbed aboard, their faces grinned. The pearl's glow a secret they guarded. Silas, still bound below, would hear of it soon enough, and Nathaniel knew his betrayal was a storm yet to break. The song of the deep whispered faintly, its melody pointing to the horizon, where the shadow ship waited. The sea watched, its eyes hidden in the waves, and Nathaniel felt the truth settle in his bones. The pearl was his, but its price was a truth he could not escape. And the journey to redemption was only beginning. The Wraith's whisper sliced through the Caribbean night, her sails taut under a wind that carried the scent of salt and secrets. The sea stretched boundless, its surface a canvas of starlight, each ripple reflecting the heavens like a mirror of forgotten dreams. The ship's timbers creaked softly, a lullaby woven with the gentle slap of waves against her hull, the rigging humming in the breeze. Captain Nathaniel Raven stood at the helm, his storm-gray eyes fixed on the horizon, where the shadow ship had last appeared. The pearl of the deep rested heavy in his coat, its glow muted but warm, pulsing in time with the amulet from Mama Celeste, its spiral casting faint patterns across the deck. The map lay open on the chart table, its ink steady now, the islands, outline fading, replaced by a single line pointing north into uncharted waters. The crew moved with quiet purpose, their faces etched with the strain of the island's trials. Caleb, his arm still bandaged, stood by the mainmast, his grizzled features set with resolve. Jonah, the young lookout, perched in the crow's nest, his eyes scanning the dark for the emerald light that had guided them before. Silas remained below, bound and guarded, his betrayal a shadow that hung over the ship like a storm cloud. The song of the deep was silent now, but its echo lingered, a mournful hum that seemed to rise from the water itself, whispering of truths yet to be faced. Nathaniel's hand rested on the amulet, its warmth a steady pulse against his chest. The pearl was his, one from the island's heart, but its promise of redemption felt distant. Tethered to the shadow ship that haunted his dreams, the vision in the pool, Elias at the helm pointing to the horizon, had shaken him, stirring memories of his brother's laugh, his trust, his final scream. The pearl could grant one wish, Mama Celeste had said, but the sea demanded its due, and Nathaniel feared the price was more than his guilt could bear. "Captain," Caleb's voice broke the silence. Rough but steady. "The men are holden for now, but Silas's words are festering. They're a skin what the pearl's worth, and what that ghost ship means." Nathaniel's gaze remained on the horizon, his voice calm. "The pearls are a way to answers, Caleb. The shadow ship's part of it a guide or a warning? We follow it." Caleb's jaw tightened, his eyes flickering with doubt. "And if it's a trap, that ship ain't natural, Captain. The men saw it empty, moving without wind. It's the sea's own, and it wants something." Nathaniel's fingers brushed the pearl in his coat, its glow seeping through the fabric. "The sea always wants something," he said, his voice low. "But I've carried Elias's ghost too long to turn back now." Caleb nodded, though his face betrayed his unease, and returned to his post. Nathaniel adjusted the wheel, steering north by the map's line, the stars above his only guide in the absence of the song. The Wraith's whisper responded, her bow cutting through the waves, her sails catching the wind's breath. The amulet pulsed, its spiral glowing faintly, and Nathaniel felt a pull, as if the sea itself were leading him toward the shadow ship. Hours passed, the night deepening, the stars burning brighter against the velvet sky. The crew worked in silence, their hands steady but their eyes wary, darting to the water as if expecting the shadows to rise. Nathaniel stood alone at the helm, the pearl a weight in his coat, the amulet a beacon in the dark. He thought of Elias, his brother's face in the pool, his eyes no longer accusing but waiting, as if the sea held a truth Nathaniel had yet to face. A cry broke the silence, sharp and urgent. "Captain, light to starboard." Jonah's voice rang from the crow's nest, trembling with excitement. Nathaniel turned, his heart thudding, and saw a tan emerald glow, brighter than before, dancing across the water like a will-o'-the-wisp. The crew rushed to the rail, their faces pale, some clutching charms, others whispering prayers. Light moved with purpose, darting north, then pausing, as if beckoning them to follow. "Adjust the sails," Nathaniel called, his voice cutting through the crew's murmurs. We chased the light, the men obeyed, hauling on ropes with practiced speed. The Wraith's whisper turning toward the glow, the amulet burned against Nathaniel's chest, its spiral pulsing in time with the light, and the pull in his coat seemed to him, its glow seeping through the fabric. The map's line pointed straight ahead, and Nathaniel felt the sea's gaze, its eyes hidden in the waves, watching, waiting. The light led them through the night, the sea calm but heavy, as if holding its breath. The Wraith's whisper sailed on, her hull slicing through the water, her lanterns swaying in the breeze. Then, as the moon reached its zenith, the light stopped, hovering above the water, and a shape emerged from the dark, the shadow ship, its black hull gleaming, its tattered sails limp yet moving, as if carried by a wing no living ship could feel. The crew froze, their breaths shallow, their eyes wide. The ship was closer now, its deck visible, its figures clear ghosts, their forms shimmering, sailors lost to the sea. At the helm stood Elias, his face pale but unmistakable, his eyes fixed on Nathaniel. The song of the deep returned, its melody soft but piercing, weaving through the air like a thread of starlight. The amulet glowed brighter, the pearl pulsed, and Nathaniel felt a pull, as if the shadow ship were calling him to board. "Captain," Caleb whispered, his voice trembling. "That's him, ain't it, your brother?" Nathaniel nodded, his throat tight. "It's Elias," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "He's showing us the way." Jonah climbed down from the nest, his young face pale. "What does he want, Captain?" "Why is he here?" Nathaniel's hand closed around the pearl, its warmth a promise and a threat. "He wants the truth," he said, his voice steady despite the storm in his chest. "The pearl's a key, but the answer's on that ship." Caleb's eyes widened, but he nodded, his cutlass ready. The crew watched, their fear palpable, but Nathaniel's resolve was iron. He adjusted the wheel, steering the Wraith's whisper closer to the shadow ship, its hull now clear in the moonlight. The song grew louder, its notes a call to follow, and the amulet burned, its spiral a guide in the dark dot. As they drew near, The shadow ship's deck shimmered, its ghosts turning to face them, their eyes hollow but knowing. Elias raised a hand, pointing north, and the emerald light flared, then vanished, leaving only the ship and its silent crew. Nathaniel felt the pearl's glow, the amulet's pulse, and the map's weight, all urging him forward. The sea was silent now, but its presence was a weight, a promise of truths yet to be faced. "Prepare to board," Nathaniel called, his voice firm. "We follow the shadow ship, whatever it takes." The crew hesitated, their hands trembling, but they obeyed, readying ropes and grappling hooks. The Wraith's whisper drew alongside the shadow ship, its hull close enough to touch, its deck a realm of mist and memory. Nathaniel stood at the rail, the pearl in his coat, the amulet glowing, Elias's eyes on him. The song of the deep whispered, its melody a path to redemption. And Nathaniel knew the sea's price was close, a truth he could no longer avoid. The Wraith's whisper glided alongside the shadow ship, her hull brushing the Caribbean's dark waters, the sea a mirror of stars that shimmered with secrets untold. The night was heavy, the air thick with salt, and the faint tang of damp wood, the ship's timbers creaking in a soft rhythm that blended with the whisper of waves. The shadow ship loomed close, its black hull gleaming like obsidian, its tattered sails swaying without wind, as if moved by the breath of the deep. Lanterns on the Wraith's whisper cast pools of amber light, but their glow faltered against the shadow ship's darkness, as if the night itself refused to touch it. Captain Nathaniel Raven stood at the rail, his storm-gray eyes fixed on the ghostly deck where figures shimmered, sailors lost to the sea, their forms faint but familiar, with Elias at the helm, his gaze piercing Nathaniel's soul. The pearl of the deep rested heavy in Nathaniel's coat, its glow muted but warm, pulsing in time with the amulet from Mama Celeste, its spiral casting faint patterns across the deck. The map, tucked beside the pearl, was still, its ink no longer shifting, its line pointing north into the uncharted waters where the shadow ship led. The song of the deep hummed softly, a mournful melody that wove through the creak of the ship, and the sigh of the wind, its notes a call to face the truths Nathaniel had long buried. The crew stood behind him, their faces pale, their hands gripping ropes and cutlasses. Caleb, his arm bandaged but steady, watched the shadow ship with grin. Resolve, Jonah, the young lookout, clung to the rigging, his eyes wide with fear and awe. Silas, still bound below, was a shadow in their minds, his betrayal a wound that festered. Nathaniel's hand rested on the amulet, its warmth a steady pulse against his chest. The vision of Elias on the shadow ship's helm had shaken him, his brother's eyes no longer accusing but waiting, as if the sea held a truth he could not yet grasp. The pearl was a key, not the answer, and the shadow ship was its keeper, guiding him to the heart of the deep. Mama Celeste's warning echoed in his mind, not all who seek the pearl are flesh and blood. Ship before him was no mere vessel, it was a memory, a reckoning, and Nathaniel knew boarding it would demand more than courage. "Captain," Caleb's voice was rough, his grizzled face set with unease. "That ship ain't right. The men are scared, say it's the drowned maiden, proved by the dead. We board that we might not come back." Nathaniel's gaze remained on the shadow ship, Elias's form clear in the moonlight. "We've come too far to turn back, Caleb," he said, his voice calm but firm. "The pearl's tied to that ship. Elias is showing us the way." Jonah's voice trembled from the rigging. "What if it's a trap, Captain? Those ghosts, they know us. They know what we've done." Nathaniel's jaw tightened, the amulet burning against his skin. "They know me," he said, his voice low, "and I know them. We board, and we face what's waiting." He turned to the crew, his eyes hard as the sea's depths. "Ready the grappling hooks. We cross to the shadow ship. Stay sharp, and stay together." The men hesitated, their hands trembling, but Caleb nodded, barking orders to all the ropes. Grappling hooks arched through the air, their iron claws biting into the shadow ship's rail, pulling the Wraith's whisper close. The two ships touched, their hulls kissing with a soft thud, and a chill swept the deck As if the sea itself exhaled, Nathaniel led the way, climbing the ropes with steady hands. The pearl and amulet pulsing in time, the map a weight in his coat. Caleb and Jonah followed, their cutlasses drawn, their breaths shallow in the heavy air. The shadow ship's deck was cold, its planks slick with mist, its air thick with the scent of salt and decay. The ghosts moved silently, their forms shimmering sailors Nathaniel had known, their faces etched with the storms and battles that had claimed them. At the helm stood Elias, his eyes fixed on Nathaniel, his hand resting on the wheel, as if staring through a sea no living man could sail. The song of the deep grew louder, its melody weaving through the ship's creaks, a call that tugged at Nathaniel's heart. "Elias," Nathaniel whispered, his voice breaking. He stepped forward, the amulet glowing, the pearl's light seeping through his coat. The ghosts turned, their eyes hollow but knowing, and Elias's gaze softened, as if seeing his brother for the first time in a decade. "You came." Elias's voice was a whisper, carried on the song, its notes both sorrowful and kind. "The pearl brought you, but the sea demands truth." Nathaniel's throat tightened, the guilt of his betrayal a weight heavier than the pearl. "I failed you," he said, his voice raw. "I left you to die. The pearl's my chance to make it right." Elias's form flickered, his eyes sad but steady. "The pearl grants one wish, but the truth is its price. Face it, Nathaniel, or the sea will claim you." The song surged, wail shaking the deck, and the ghosts closed in, their forms pressing close, their whispers filling the air. "Coward, traitor, brother." Nathaniel's heart thudded, the amulet burning, the pearl pulsing in his coat. He saw the moment again, Elias at the helm, the rival ship closing in, Nathaniel's choice to flee, to save himself, and the Wraith's whisper, the scream that followed. The silence that came after it was a wound that had never healed. "I'm sorry," Nathaniel said, his voice breaking. "I was weak. I chose myself over you. I've carried that every day." The ghosts paused, their whispers fading, and Elias's form grew clearer, his hand reaching out, not to strike but to rest on Nathaniel's shoulder. The touch was cold, but it carried a warmth that Nathaniel hadn't felt in years. "The truth is your sacrifice," Elias said, his voice soft. "The pearl is yours, but the sea will ask for more." The song softened, its melody a gentle hum, and the ghosts stepped back, their forms fading into the mist. Elias remained, his eyes holding Nathaniel's, a silent forgiveness that was both gift and burden. The amulet cooled, its glow dimming, and the pearl's light pulsed once, then stilled. Nathaniel felt a shift, as if the sea had heard his confession and accepted it. "For now, Captain," Caleb's voice cut through the silence, urgent and sharp. The ship it's moving. Nathaniel turned, his heart leaping. The shadow ship was drifting, its hull pulling away from the Wraith's whisper, its sails filling with an unseen wind. Elias stood at the helm, his gaze fixed on the horizon. And Nathaniel knew this was not the end. The pearl was his, but the shadow ship was leading them further, to a place where the sea's final truth waited. Back to the ship, Nathaniel called, his voice firm. The crew scrambled across the ropes, their hands shaking but their movements swift. The Wraith's whisper rocked gently, her lanterns glowing, as Nathaniel took the helm, steering after the shadow ship. Song of the deep hummed softly, its notes a guide, and the amulet pulsed once more, its spiral a beacon in the dark. The shadow ship sailed north, its hull a shadow against the sea, Elias's form a silent sentinel at the helm. Nathaniel felt the pearl's weight, the map's pull, and the truth of his confession, a burden lifted but not gone. The sea watched, its eyes hidden in the waves. And Nathaniel knew the journey was not over. The pearl was a key, and the shadow ship was its lock, leading him to a truth that might finally set him free. The Wraith's whisper sailed through a Caribbean night as deep and boundless as the sea itself, her hull cutting through waves that shimmered with starlight, each ripple a whisper of secrets older than time. The air was heavy with the briny scent of salt, laced with the faint creak of the ship's timbers. and the sigh of the wind through her rigging, a melody that spoke of journeys long and perilous. The shadow ship led the way, its black hull a specter against the horizon, its tattered sails filled with an unseen breeze, gliding north into uncharted waters. Captain Nathaniel Raven stood at the helm, his storm-gray eyes fixed on the ghostly vessel, where Elias's silhouette stood at the wheel, a silent guide to the heart of the deep. The pearl of the deep rested in Nathaniel's coat, its glow, muted pulse, warm against his side, resonating with the amulet from Mama Celeste, its spiral casting faint patterns across the deck. The map, now still, lay open on the chart table, its ink tracing a single line north, where no island or port was marked, only the sea, vast and unknowable. The song of the deep hummed softly, its mournful notes weaving through the night. Call that tug at Nathaniel's soul, promising answers, but warning of a price yet unpaid. The crew worked in hushed silence, their faces pale under the weight of the shadow ship's presence. Caleb, his bandaged arm steady, stood by the mainmast, his grizzled eyes wary. Jonah, perched in the crow's nest, scanned the horizon, his young face etched with resolve. Silas, still bound below, was a shadow that lingered, his betrayal. Storm held at bay. Nathaniel's hand rested on the amulet, its warmth a steady pulse against his chest. The confession on the shadow ship, his admission of guilt for abandoning Elias, had lifted a weight, but not the burden. Elias's ghost had forgiven him, yet the sea's gaze was unrelenting, its eyes hidden in the waves, watching, waiting. The pearl was a key, not the end, and the shadow ship was leading them to a final reckoning. Mama Celeste's words echoed in his mind, the sea always takes her due. Nathaniel felt the truth of it now, a tide pulling him toward a truth he could no longer avoid. Captain Caleb's voice was rough, breaking the silence. The men are olden, but the shadow ship's goddamn spoke. They're saying it's leading us to the edge of the world. Nathaniel's gaze remained on the shadow ship, Elias's form clear in the moonlight. Let them talk, Caleb, he said, his voice calm but firm. The sea's got its edge, but we're not there yet. The pearl's guiding us, and Elias is showing the way. Caleb's jaw tightened, his eyes flickering with doubt. And if it's a trap, that ship ain't alive, Captain. It's the sea zone, and it wants something from us. Nathaniel's fingers brushed the pearl, its glow seeping through his coat. It wants the truth, he said, his voice low, and I've given it. Whatever's left, I'll face. Caleb nodded, though his face betrayed his unease, and returned to his post. Nathaniel adjusted the wheel, steering after the shadow ship, the stars above his guide in the absence of land. The Wraith's whisper responded, her bow slicing through the waves, her sails taut with the wind's breath. The amulet pulsed, its spiral glowing faintly, and Nathaniel felt a pull, as if the sea itself were drawing him toward its heart. Hours passed, the night stretching on, the stars burning brighter against the velvet sky. The shadow ship sailed ahead, its hull a shadow against the sea, its ghost silent but watchful. Then, as midnight approached, the song of the deep grew louder, its melody a wail that shook the air. The shadow ship slowed, its sails falling limp, and a faint glow appeared on the horizon, not the emerald light, but a soft, silvery radiance, like moonlight trapped in mist. Captain? Jonah called from the crow's nest, his voice sharp with awe. Something ahead, a circle of light, like a reef but glowing. Nathaniel turned, his heart thudding, and saw a ring of shimmering water, its surface alive with light, its center dark as the deep. The shadow ship stopped. At its edge, Elias's form turning to face Nathaniel, his eyes a silent command. The song reached a crescendo, its notes weaving through the creak of the ship and the sigh of the wind, and Nathaniel felt the pearl's glow, the amulet's pulse, and the map's weight, all urging him forward. Lower the sails, Nathaniel called, his voice cutting through the crew's murmurs. We anchor here. The crew obeyed, their hands trembling but steady. The Wraith's whisper coming to rest just outside the glowing ring. The shadow ship lingered, its ghosts watching, Elias's gaze heavy with meaning. Nathaniel stepped to the rail, the pearl in his hand, its light pulsing in time with the ring's glow. The amulet burned, its spiral a beacon, and Nathaniel knew this was the place, the heart of the deep, where the sea's final truth waited. He turned to the crew, his eyes hard but kind. "Stay with the ship," he said. "This is my burden. I go alone." Caleb stepped forward, his face grinned. "Captain, you can't. That light, it's not natural. Let us come with you." Nathaniel shook his head, the pearl warm in his hand. "The sea's calling me, Caleb. You followed me this far. Guard the ship and keep Silas bound." Jonah's voice trembled from the rigging. "What if you don't come back, Captain?" Nathaniel met his eyes, a faint smile on his lips. "Then you sail for Port Royal. Live free." He climbed into a longboat, the pearl and amulet pulsing, the map tucked in his coat. The crew watched in silence, their faces pale, as Nathaniel rowed toward the glowing ring, the shadow ship a silent sentinel at its edge. The song of the deep filled the air, its melody a call to face the final truth. As he crossed the ring, the water shimmered, its light enveloping him, and the world shifted, the sea falling away to reveal a vast expanse of mist and starlight. Elias stood before him, not a ghost but whole. His face, as Nathaniel remembered, strong, kind, with eyes that held no blame. The song softened, its notes a gentle hum, and the pearl glowed brighter, its light a star in Nathaniel's hand. "You faced the truth," Elias said, his voice warm, like the brother Nathaniel had lost. "The pearl is yours, but the sea asks one last thing." Nathaniel's throat tightened, the amulet burning against his chest. "What does it want?" he asked, his voice raw. Elias's eyes softened, his hand resting on Nathaniel's shoulder, a touch both cold and warm. "Your wish," he said. "The pearl grants one, but the sea claims it. Choose now, Nathaniel, and choose true." Nathaniel looked at the pearl, its glow a promise of redemption, of erasing the past, of bringing Elias back. But the song whispered, and he saw the truth. The sea's due was not his life, but his burden. To wish for Elias's return was to defy the sea, to chain his brother to a world he'd left. The true wish was forgiveness, not for Elias, but for himself. "I wish to be free," Nathaniel said, his voice steady. "Free of the guilt, free to sail without your shadow." Elias smiled, his form fading, the song softening to a whisper. The pearl's glow flared, then dimmed, its light sinking into Nathaniel's chest, merging with the amulet's spiral. The mist cleared, the ring of light fading, and Nathaniel found himself back in the longboat, the Wraith's whisper waiting, her lanterns glowing like stars. The shadow ship was gone, Elias with it, and the sea was silent, its eyes no longer watching. Nathaniel rowed back, the amulet cool against his skin, the pearl now just a stone, its power spent. The crew pulled him aboard, their faces a mix of awe and relief. And Nathaniel knew the journey was nearly done, but one final reckoning awaited, with Silas and the sea's last whispers. The Wraith's whisper sailed under a Caribbean sky ablaze with stars, the sea a vast mirror reflecting their light, each ripple a whisper of journeys ended and begun. The air was soft with the scent of salt and damp canvas, the ship's timbers creaking in a gentle rhythm that blended with the sigh of waves against her hull, a lullaby for souls weary of the deep. The shadow ship was gone, its ghostly form dissolved into the night, taking Elias's shade with it. Captain Nathaniel Raven stood at the helm, his storm-gray eyes fixed on the horizon, where the sea met the sky in a line as thin as hope. The pearl of the deep, now a dull stone in his coat, rested beside the map, its ink faded, its purpose fulfilled. The amulet from Mama Celeste hung cool against his chest, its spiral no longer glowing, a quiet relic of the sea's truths. The crew moved with a hushed reverence, their hands steady on ropes and sails, their faces softened by the night's calm. Caleb, his arms still bandaged, stood by the mainmast, his grizzled features relaxed, as if the sea's weight had lifted. Jonah, the young lookout, leaned against the rail, his eyes tracing the stars, his fear replaced by a quiet wonder. Silas, still bound below, was a shadow yet to be faced, his betrayal a storm that Nathaniel knew must be settled before the Wraith's whisper could sail free. The song of the deep was silent now, its mournful melody a memory, but its echo lingered in the wind, a reminder of the truths Nathaniel had faced. The Pearl had granted his wish not to bring Elias back, but to free Nathaniel from the guilt that had anchored him for a decade. The sea had taken its due not in blood but in truth, and Nathaniel felt lighter, as if the waves themselves carried his burden away, yet the horizon called, its promise both vast and uncertain. And Nathaniel knew the journey's end was not a destination, but a moment of peace, a chance to sail without the weight of the past. "Captain," Caleb's voice broke the silence, rough but warm. "The men are ready to sail for Port Royal. They're asking what's next after all this." Nathaniel's gaze remained on the horizon, his voice calm. "We sail free, Caleb. The Pearl's done its work. The sea's given us its blessing." Caleb nodded, a faint smile on his lips. "And Silas, he's still a snake, bound or not. The men won't trust him." Nathaniel's jaw tightened, the amulet cool against his skin. "Bring him up," he said. "It's time to settle accounts." Caleb disappeared below, and Nathaniel adjusted the wheel, the Wraith's whisper responding with a grace that felt like forgiveness. The stars above burned bright, their light a map for those who knew how to read them, and Nathaniel steered by their guidance, the sea stretching endless before him. The Pearl, now just a stone, was a reminder of the price paid, the truth faced, and the freedom won. Caleb returned, Silas between him and another sailor, his hands bound, his eyes blazing with defiance. The crew gathered, their faces a mix of wariness and resolve, the lanterns casting long shadows across the deck. Silas stood tall, his broad frame unbowed, his beard flecked with salt, his gaze locked on Nathaniel. "You got your Pearl, Raven," Silas said, his voice a growl. "But you're still a coward. You think confessing to ghosts makes you a captain." Nathaniel stepped forward, his hand resting on the amulet, his voice steady. "The sea judged me, Silas, and I faced it. You betrayed your crew, your oath. That's a debt you can't outrun." Silas's lips curled into a sneer. "And what'll you do, hang me, toss me to the sharks? The men won't stand for it." Nathaniel turned to the crew, his eyes meeting theirs, Jonah's wide with hope, Caleb's steady with trust, the others a mix of fear and loyalty. "The pirate's code is clear," he said, his voice carrying over the deck. "Betrayal means exile or death. Silas chose his path. What say you?" The crew murmured, their voices rising in a chorus of agreement. "Exile," Caleb said, his tone firm. "Give him a boat, a day's water, and let the sea decide his fate." Jonah nodded, his voice soft but sure. "He don't belong with U.S. Captain, not after what he did." Nathaniel faced Silas, his eyes hard but not unkind. "You're no longer crew. A boat, water, a chance, that's more than you gave me." Silas spat on the deck, his eyes blazing, but he said nothing as Caleb and the others led him to a longboat. They lowered it into the sea, a single cask of water at his feet, and cut the ropes, leaving Silas to the mercy of the waves. The crew watched in silence, the lantern's glow reflecting on the water. As the boat drifted into the dark, a shadow swallowed by the night. Nathaniel returned to the helm, the Wraith's whisper steady under his hands. The sea was calm, its surface a mirror of stars, its silence a gift after the trials of the deep. He thought of Elias, his brother's face no longer a ghost, but a memory, warm and kind, a laugh on the wind. The Pearl had freed him, not from the past, but from its chains, and the horizon stretched before him, a promise of new dawns. "Raise the sails," Nathaniel called, his voice clear, carrying over the deck. "We sail for Port Royal, then wherever the wind takes us." The crew obeyed, their hands swift on the ropes, the sails catching the breeze with a snap. The Wraith's whisper surged forward, her bow cutting through the waves, her lanterns swaying like stars. Jonah climbed to the crow's nest, his voice ringing out, "Clear skies, Captain. The sea's smiling on us." Nathaniel smiled, a rare warmth in his chest. The amulet hung quiet. The pearl a silent stone, the map a relic of a journey complete. The sea stretched endless, its secrets now at peace, and Nathaniel felt the tide of his guilt recede, leaving only the rhythm of the waves, the creak of the ship, and the stars above as dawn broke, painting the sky in hues of coral and gold. The Wraith's whisper sailed on, her course set for Port Royal, but her heart bound to the sea. Nathaniel stood at the helm, the horizon a line of possibility, the past a shadow that no longer followed. The sea whispered softly, not a song but a sigh, and Nathaniel knew he was free not to forget, but to live, to sail, to find new stories. In the waves, the Wraith's whisper glided into the dawn, her sails full, her crew united, the sea a vast embrace that held them all, and somewhere, in the deep, Elias's laugh echoed, a note of forgiveness that carried Nathaniel toward the horizon, where the sea and sky became one.